One of the most exciting things about Watches and Wonders is visiting some independent brands, because I feel like they don't really follow strict release rules and are always good for a surprise, as I have experienced once more. So that's why for today I have prepared a few impressions of pieces that I could get my hands on and impress me either through their technical achievements or their historical significance, and makes these watches worth exploring. So I would say let's start with the first brand that I visited, which was GreubelForsey, and here's a watch you really need to see. One thing that really made GreubelForsey what they are today is that since its founding in 2004, they have become a powerhouse by blending a distinctive design with truly unique and especially meaningful inventions, and all of that paired with truly top-notch hand finishing and handmade quality. Well, the piece I am holding in my hands is the Tourbillon Cardan, and underlines what I just said, as it truly carries all the characteristics of GreubelForsey. What we have here is GreubelForsey's 8th fundamental invention, which is basically designed around 3 core principles intended to maximize chronometric precision through high-speed rotation, a fixed inclination, and controlled tilting of the movement. We have at the heart of the watch a tourbillon that completes a full rotation in just 16 seconds, which is much faster than a standard 60-second one. And the idea is simple: by rotating faster, it can average out the positional errors more frequently, improving stability. Now, unlike traditional tourbillons, which were designed for pocket watches worn vertically in a pocket and optimized for that fixed position, this one is tilted at 30 degrees. And the reason is the balance is always inclined, helping it cope better with the constantly changing positions of a wristwatch, so it never stays flat. But what really sets this model apart is the Cardan system and where the model derives its name from. So we have 2 interlocking rings that tilt the entire tourbillon assembly back and forth in a controlled motion of 30 degrees every 48 seconds. Instead of staying in one orientation, the whole mechanism is constantly and precisely changing its position relative to gravity. Now, the next brand I visited was Bove, and was another brand outside of the Palexpo. And you know, as every year, Bove did not disappoint, as they again introduced a completely new timepiece. Now, the thing with Bove is that it is a brand that truly requires a deeper dive to grasp its significance, because we are speaking here of a family-owned independent that produces more than 95% of its components in-house, and by the way, won numerous patents and prestigious awards. So the piece I chose for today's video highlights these characteristics and is the new Recital 31, which by the way solves an issue related to perpetual calendar settings. Because traditionally, if you overshoot the date on a perpetual calendar even by a few days, you either had to let the watch run until it caught up, or send it back to the manufacturer for adjustment. And here comes Bove, who solved this by utilizing a perpetual quick adjustment corrector. Means instead of having to click 4 different tiny pushers on the side of the case, Bove has a single dedicated pusher, so every press advances all indications at once. And by the way, the spherical precision moon phase you see at 6 o'clock has also its own dedicated pusher, and is 122 years accurate if you keep your watch running constantly. If we turn the watch, it is at least as interesting as the front, because first of all, the new 100% in-house movement, containing unbelievable 469 components, is exclusively hand-finished and hand-engraved within Bove's 4 walls. And here I even had the opportunity to capture how the new engraving pattern called Square Stars is done, which shows the level of detail involved. And by the way, takes around 15 hours to complete, as I was told. Before we move on, one last thing worth mentioning about this watch is that if you look at the case back, it indicates where to set each function, which is a very thoughtful and practical detail, and I'm pretty sure many collectors will appreciate this. Now, my last visit of day one at Watches and Wonders was at Kudoke, a brand that really made me question pricing like never before, as what they offer in this price range gives the term value for money a whole new meaning. If you never heard of this brand, let me tell you this, you have truly been missing out, because what we have here is a brand that offers hand-finished and handmade watches in Germany, providing a level of craftsmanship that truly blew my mind the first time I came across it. Especially considering that we are speaking of a small independent manufacturer founded by Stefan and Yves Kudoke, a husband and wife duo that runs every aspect of the business together. So today the success of the brand continues with 2-dial variants featuring the traditional trembloche technique. But what the heck is actually trembloche? Well, this involves an engraver using a sharp tool to create countless tiny facets across the plate's surface, because this texture is achieved entirely by hand. Of course, 2 dials are never identical, so means each one is truly unique. By the way, both watches are equipped with the in-house caliber one, featuring a distinctively large hand-engraved balance bridge and a frosted finish that reflects the brand's philosophy, which is a deep obsession with manual finishing and personal attention to detail. The good news is all of this comes at a price of around 15k, which I think is hard to beat in terms of value for money, especially in a market where comparable craftsmanship at this level is becoming increasingly rare as prices continue to rise out of hand. So if you're looking to step away from mass-produced luxury and want to get watchmaking in its purest form, where the soul of the maker is visible in every bridge and every facet of the watch, Kudoke might be worth taking a look. Now, speaking of watchmaking in its purest form, the first brand I visited on day 2 moves away from the traditional way we read time, and honestly shows that creativity knows no limits, especially when you let go of the basic principles of conventional watchmaking. The name of the brand really reflects their watches, as it was chosen to evoke the Latin phrase sui generis, meaning of its own kind or unique in its characteristics. And honestly, this perfectly aligns with their products, which contain a time display system entirely different from anything else in the industry. So the watch I have here is called the Genius Eternal Galop and celebrates the Chinese Year of the Horse and demonstrates the unique display approach beautifully. If you look at the dial, you see no regular hands. Instead, the time is told by these hand-engraved horses that run across the 2 dials. By the way, something that I was told during my visit is that each horse is sculpted by hand with its own distinct personality, ensuring that no 2 segments are ever alike by design, and I was able to capture it here at the booth, and it just shows the artistry behind it. Well, the question remains, how does this actually show time? The hours are read by the diamond marker on the outer ring, simple and clear so far, but the real magic happens when you look at the minutes at the center. So instead of a traditional dial, we have 2 circles stacked like a figure 8. The top is numbered 50, 60 and 10, while the one below shows 20, 30 and 40. I know at first that layout looks quite chaotic, but it makes perfect sense the moment you see the horses in motion. Because the horses move in a continuous 8 pattern, so they naturally gallop past the 10, cross the intersection to hit the 20, 30 and 40, then climb back up to 50 and 60. And important to mention here is that the lead horse acts as your wandering pointer, making the path of time visible in a way that's completely unique to Genius. Now, the next brand I visited on day 2 is a bit less complex, yet it won me over because its appeal lies in its heritage and a sense of simplicity paired with sharp attention to detail. While icons like the Royal Oak and the Nautilus became mass-produced legends, GeraldCharles, I think, still remains Gerald Genta's more intimate final chapter, founded in 2000 before he passed away. What's also very beautiful about this story and the current situation at GeraldCharles is that the current designer, Octavio Garcia, who used to work with Gerald Genta at AP, is now in charge of all the designs. So this feels less like a tribute and more like a direct continuation of Genta's design legacy. So the piece I have chosen from my GeraldCharles visit is one of my absolute favorite, which is the Masterlink. And I remember when it was first released in 2024, I became completely obsessed with it. Today that line has been expanded with a perpetual calendar, which by the way contains the world's first asymmetrical automatic perpetual calendar movement. But upon closer inspection, the complication itself I think is just a small part of what's really happening, as the watch has to offer details that need further exploration. If you look at the dial at first glance, it appears either printed or engraved, but in reality it is constructed in two distinct levels, each with its own finishing, creating that subtle but very effective contrast. And another important feature of this watch, which is not visible at first glance but is also a huge benefit for the wearer, which is the titanium case, is scratch resistant, same as the bracelet. And as the product manager at the GeraldCharles told me during my visit, is that the inspiration came during a trip to Japan, where he came across a specific treatment of titanium used outside of the watch industry. Something I would have loved to learn more about, but time is usually tight during these visits. If you're still with me and enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate your support by subscribing, because it is your support that helps me go the extra mile. Now back to the next watch, which is, to be honest, an unexpected discovery from a brand I had seen often but never explored in depth. But once I did, I really was surprised. One thing that's really interesting about RudisSylva is that while so many brands today brag about how much they do in-house, this brand does the opposite. But wait, that doesn't make sense, or maybe it actually does. Because the brand decided to use a network of highly skilled specialists for different stages of production. So everything from the movement, development to finishing and decoration. Basically, this means that every element, the architecture, the finishing, the assembly, and literally every single component has been crafted by the absolute best in their respective fields. And the piece I have in my hands highlights this perfectly. So this is the RS16 by RudisSylva, and is built around the very unusual idea, and honestly really blew my mind. Well, instead of a traditional tourbillon, this watch uses two connected balance wheels that work against each other. So if gravity makes one balance run slightly faster, the other is affected the opposite way and runs slightly slower. So the differences are cancelled out, keeping the watch more stable. But as I mentioned, the finishing of this watch is top-notch thanks to a network of specialists, ranging from tapering pyramid guichet on the main plate and snail barrel drums to bridges with circular graining and diamond polished gear train corners. But in terms of finishing, the standout is the titanium cage bridge, which alone takes around 30 hours of handwork to achieve its 28 inward angles, which is an almost extinct level of hand beveling in modern watchmaking. So from a watchmaker's perspective, the sheer level of detail here really drew me in, but so did the idea of bringing together the best of the best to create something truly unique as a collective. Now we finished my journey at Watches and Wonders through the independence with Louis Monet, and a piece that carries huge horological importance. It is the model 1860, and as the name suggests, it refers to the year 1860 when Louis Monet created the world's very first chronograph. If you come across Louis Monet for the first time and visit their website, you will see a brand that relies heavily on a space theme. Everywhere you look, it's all about space and time. Well, the reason for this is quite fascinating because it goes back to the 18th century and Louis Monet himself, who was a passionate astronomer. One day, he eventually reached a point where he needed a high-precision instrument to measure the exact transit of stars, and for this purpose, he invented the chronograph, which again shows how necessity and urgency can drive some of the greatest horological breakthroughs. So the piece I'm reviewing today tells that exact story. Design-wise, it is heavily inspired by that very first chronograph, which you can see here in comparison, with the key difference being that today's version merges that historical DNA with the highest level of modern technical engineering. Speaking of modern engineering, what's really unique here is that the titanium case alone consists of 51 individual components, and if you look closely at the dial, you can see the sub-dials are actually separately constructed for added depth. So as unique as the story is, so is the watch itself. With only 12 pieces produced, this truly remains a collector's item for those who value the deep connection between history, time and the cosmic journey that Louis Monet started over 2 centuries ago. Now, what I have shown you today is that the world of horology still has so much to offer, but it requires you to occasionally take a different path. Sometimes stepping away from the purely commercial and into a world driven by emotion and personal stories, and that's the power of the independence. It is truly fascinating to visit these brands because you witness a level of passion behind the people that goes far beyond just doing their job. And I think it is this dedication that resonates with niche watch buyers, because it transforms the experience, makes them feel like a valid individual rather than just one of many. So that concludes my journey through the independence at Watches and Wonders, and I hope I could introduce you to a new brand or maybe a special timepiece. But I'm also curious to hear which one was your favorite. If you have any questions about these brands, the watches themselves, or if you want a deeper dive into technical explanations of today, feel free to drop them in the comment section down below. In the meantime, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, show some love and follow Watch Mentor, because without your presence, the channel would be nothing more than a self-talk. So for now, thank you for tuning in, and as always, stay blessed and see you next time.